Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to 4Fusion Friday. That's right. Once a month show where we talk about all things fusion, pretty much all instrumental music, jazz fusion, jazz rock, straight ahead fusion, prog fusion, metal fusion, whatever. It's the music we love to talk about. We want to give it its own show. So here we are at episode number 2. I want to introduce the rest of the crew for today. We've got the two guys who pretty much came up with this concept, George Lamie and Eric Porter. And then since today's episode is going to be a lot having to do with bass players, we figured can't do the show without our resident bass player himself, Mr. Louis Nasser.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
What's happening, gentlemen? How's everybody doing? It's
Good.
Friday.
Very good.
Weekend is upon us, right? Just about. We got the workday still to get through, but we're getting there. We're getting there. Very, very close. All right. So as we like to do with this show, it's usually set up in 3 segments. So George is going to take us through some new releases that we should be looking out for. Then we'll go to our 4-album base of the show, right? The 4 albums that we're going to be talking about and comparing and ranking. And then we'll finish it up with George's pick from last month that we've all been listening to. We're going to talk about that as well. So George, I'll turn it over to you for all the new stuff coming out.
Right. I know there's a lot of seekers out there, so they like to track stuff down and try stuff out. So here's some of those new releases that have come out since the last time we were on. Guitar player Mike Miller's new album, Trust. Big cast: Jimmy Johnson, Tom Breckline, Chad Wackerman, Scott Kinsey, Jeff Babco, Brandon Fields, Walt Fowler. I mean, huge LA, all the who's who of LA session cats. For me, it's a little on the relaxing side. I know Eric's heard it too. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I think when we had the back and forth, it's a little more laid back than, a lot of the stuff that I listen to. But good. I mean, good stuff, but
Yeah.
just kind of, a little tame maybe.
There's quality there, but it's more in a chill mood. So if you like that, that's one to check out. That's it's on YouTube. You got an interesting release from a duo, Roy Marchbank and Atma Anur, an album called None Other. This guy is I got turned on to him by our friend Andy Edwards. The technique, the guitar player technique is Sean Lane level. I mean, the guy is really crazy. The songwriting is solid. Not fond of the production. I think the drum sound is a little brittle. And Marchbank himself, I don't know what it is. Something about his phrasing, it all sounds alien. Nothing sounds like normal phrasing to me. I know, which of you guys have heard that one? Anybody? Eric, you heard it, right?
Oh, I haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah, I listened to a few tracks. Yeah. It's definitely what I listened to. I wasn't nuts about the production, and he definitely has a strange tone, which struck me right off the bat. But the guy's technique is like
super fast and clean, almost to the point of disbelief. Yeah. So that's a Bandcamp thing, so check that out. There's a Italian guitar player new to me called Paolo Zu. His album is called Venus. It's a guitar power trio. It's 12 tracks, but 6 of them are interludes, so it's kind of got that interluditis thing that I don't care for, but he's a varied player, kind of a little bit like Wayne Krantz, then gets heavier in spots. Production's nice and crisp. It's an interesting record, so that's a Bandcamp try. Then you got Fusio Group XXX. It's the 8th album from this Hungarian band. Tribal Tech vibes on this one. The drummer Peter Zendoffi, he's recorded with Gary Willis. They were in a band called Loop Doctors, which is basically electronica meets fusion. And you can hear it. The whole thing is it's a quintet, very in the Tribal Tech vein. Then you got Kaltenecker Marco. You might be interested in this one, Louis. This is it's a fusion duo, 2 guys from Special Providence, the keyboard player and the drummer. The album is called Space Junk, and this also is a heavy electronic influence. It's like electronic fusion. Kaltenecker is an incredible player, and for my money, Marco is more impressive on this than he is the Special Providence records. He kind of doesn't stand out to me in that band, but on this, you can hear everything.
Is that on Bandcamp?
That is a YouTube thing. I didn't see it on Bandcamp.
A YouTube. All right.
I don't know.
It'd be cool to get a link to it because I would love to hear that. I'm a big fan. Yeah.
And
We'll make sure after the episode to have everything listed down below in the comments for people watching. So
yeah, I know where you can hear it. I don't necessarily know where you can buy this stuff other than the Bandcamp ones, obviously, you can buy there. Last but not least is Cameron Graves, live from the Seven Spheres. This is a scorching live album from the Stanley Clarke, Kamasai Washington keyboard player. It's his quartet from last year's 7 album. 5 tunes from that, 2 from the debut. Those 2 are the longer pieces where he kind of lets everybody cut loose. The 23-minute closer, End of Corporatism, just forget about it. Blazes the house down. If you want a balls out fusion record, this is the one to check out. I know at least Eric has been into this one.
Yep, I did a review for the site, and I just, obviously I like talking guitar. We got Lewis to talk bass. It's Colin Cook is the guitar player, and obviously Cameron Graves is unbelievable, but he's stellar player. The whole band's great, and that the 23-minute closer, George. I think everyone, the drum, right? There's a drum solo. Everyone has a chance to shine in that one, but just a killer album. The only disappointment is you can't get a physical copy. That kind of stuff.
I heard George's link and I went to try to get it, and then Dinosaur Me was given the digital bird that I can't get it. So like, all right. Yeah. But it is a phenomenal recording. This is true.
Killer.
Great production. Just I'm usually don't get that excited about play the back catalog live albums, but this one you can't help it.
No.
So that's what we got on the new releases since last month.
And we did see, George, Derek Sheranian's going to have something coming out, right? July 1st or something.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Vortex, so, I think. And he did release one song, I think.
Yeah.
That's out there. And why can't I think of what's the label?
Inside Out.
Inside Out. So Inside Out has a clip out there, and I think Derek has it on his site as well, on the Facebook site.
Yeah, his stuff is always really solid, so that'll be really cool. Cool. All right, so since the topic is bass players, George has picked 4 bass player albums, 2 of which are probably called classics by many, and 2 are more recent classics, right? So we've got Stanley Clarke, School Days. We've got Jaco Pastorius, self-titled. We've got Fernando Molinari, Reaching Inside. And we've got Alex Lofoco's Beyond, right? So 2 old, 2 new. We've all been listening to them over the last couple of weeks. And we're going to rank them here for you, talk a little bit about them. So why don't we have Lewis go first today and give us his number 4 out of the 4 choices.
Okay, so this is almost inhumanly cruel, right? I mean, look, I just want to say just very briefly, just a few words in general about bass players and what happens when bass players put out records, right? The joke that every bass player has heard told to them a million times, but for viewers who may not be bass players or have not heard it, is what's the difference between a bass player and a toilet? The toilet only takes shit from one guy at a time. That's basically, this is our lot on stage and in life, right? And so what ends up happening is that the bass players tend to be overlooked by a lot of people. And when they put out an album, I think that there is this desire to show the world all the shit you can do. And you go through a lot of things, sometimes it's like they throw everything and the kitchen sink into these records, and it creates a little bit of it's a little weird sometimes. I don't want to talk ill of my brothers and sisters, but this is what happens, right? We've all been there, and you hear it. So I think that the Jaco Pastorius album, right, this really was the template for how do I show not only that I can play anything that I choose, but that I also have the ability to choose not to play certain things. And I have to have the ability to also write really good stuff. This guy wrote 8 of these songs on this one, right? And the sound is just remarkable, right? The sound of this man's fretless, he actually ripped out the frets from his bass. He didn't, this is a Fender Jazz. And I think it's just one of those, the minute you hear Donna Lee, which is that's the one thing he didn't write, but the minute you hear that bass solo, it's like a thunder strike and also a wake-up call to everybody. Like, all right, we're no longer playing bass. I'm a musician and my instrument happens to be bass. Here you go, right? And so he did this with this record. And there's so many great things and so many incredible people here, right? That this became sort of a template for a particular style of bass player solo records, of which we'll speak a little bit more later. Stanley Clarke, on the other hand, this just has that unmistakable alembic sound that he is so well known for, right? I don't even know if he actually played an alembic for this record, but he has that tone, that piano string tone, that deep, and to me it sounds like it's an active bass. I don't know, I could be wrong. But and again, the personalities and the talent on this record are also incredible. So these are like the two basic directions in which people would then take things in a way, right? So these are like they're classics for a reason, right? I don't think that there's any tracks here that I would skip ever. And I haven't been listening to these for a couple of weeks. I've been listening to these for decades, right? This is so, I know them very well. I know I've dabbled with playing some of these songs, although I'm not a jazz player. These two are very much jazz records. They're fusion records in the sense that they have a little bit of the rock sensibility and they have a little, but they're mainly jazz players, right? This is what they're doing, but they're playing electric instruments and they're playing with that language, with that sound palette. So on the other hand, just in general, these other two are much more modern, right? They're very recent records. Both of these happen to feature, and this is something which unites them in my listening experience, they both feature Marco Miniman on drums. And that is a unique talent in his own right, and is a very idiosyncratic player. So when you hear Marco's playing, you can't confuse him with anybody else. It's him, and it's just him, and that's the end of it. So that caused me some problems in listening to these. I was in contact with Alex about this, and I haven't had it quite as much time as I would like, but I have heard all of it a few times. And I would say that out of the four, the only reason I would rank this one as my number 4 is, and again, we are talking about microscopic, ultra pedantic differences, right? This record is absolutely killer, and you would have to be crazy not to buy it if you like this sort of music. Let's just start with that. It has Jordan Rudess on synths. It has Marco Miniman on drums. It has Eric Marinthal on sax, and then he has Robbie Miola on guitar. And then Alex Lofoco is off the chain great playing bass, right? So yeah, but this has a little bit of that harder modern edge that you're not going to find in either one of these, right? And I welcome that. I'm a rock guy. I like some crunch, right? I'm not a big fan of the concept that when it's the bass solo, everybody quiets down and the bass player hits their chorus pedal. That's always what happens, right? It's like, no, man, the bass has a lot more power than the guitar. So we can also demonstrate that in a way. So this is why I will rank this one as 4. It has a little bit of that everything in the kitchen sink syndrome from my perspective. I love the I love the fact that he used the saxophone extensively. He also has a guest pianist, I guess he's Hungarian, Tomasz Bura. I don't know anything about him. I apologize to Hungarian viewers. I can't handle your language, but plays great. It's a beautiful record. It's very well produced to my ears. It sounds great in the car. It sounds great with headphones, which is the ultimate test for me. I like it a lot. But this would be my number 4, only by virtue of thanks to the vagaries of US postage. I've had little time with it, and that's not Alex's fault. So this is an apology, but that would be why I would rank it less, because I find it a little, my brain hasn't been able to really do the math on it yet. And it sounds a little bit like there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm going one way and then he pulls me in another way, and then, oh, but look at this, and I can do this thing too. And I'm juggling a fucking plate, but I'm tapping and I'm doing, and it has a little bit of that, So this is why I would rank this guy as my number 4. My number 3 would definitely.
Oh well, we're gonna go all the way around.
Okay, number 4, yeah.
Yep.
Number 4.
George, what do you got at number 4?
I like the first episode. Small differences here. Number 4 is the Jaco. I would say one thing is it tries to be too many things to too many people. I think the producer, Bobby Colombi produced it. He seems intent on every track being, okay, here's the thing, here's the harmonics track, and here's the pretty ballad, and here's the vocal tune. It seems like it's trying to impress sometimes more often than it's trying to entertain for me. I would say that my favorite pieces are the 2 long set pieces, Kuru and Cha-Cha. Those both have sick Jaco bass lines, and Herbie Hancock. Other than Jaco, he's the guy on this album. He's just killing it on those tunes. And it actually has a couple of things that usually screw up fusion albums. He handles here. There's a vocal tune and it's good. It's like an R&B tune. And there's a ballad and it's really good. Continuum is probably the song from this album that defined this album more than any other tune on here going forward. It's a gorgeous ballad. But the second side has a few, gets kind of cute with the duets, and there's a duet with the French horn player, and then there's a track with that he's not even on, with just Herbie and the string section. That's kind of boring. So just because there is a couple songs on here that I don't always want to sit through, it's enough to put it number 4 for me.
Cool. Eric?
Well, I think something that Lewis said when he kicked it off with Stanley and Jaco, and he's listened to those for years, and I do realize that those are classics. My number 4 is Stanley Clarke, School Days. And I know School Days is a great song. There's a couple songs in here, like I think it's Desert Song that McLaughlin is on. It just kind of meanders to me. It feels like it's a lot of noodling. There's some stuff that has that 70s funk, which I like, but it at this point, to me, I'm coming at this new. So Lewis, like, you're listening to these new guys. As much as I know about Stanley Clarke, I haven't had this for 35 or 40 years. I've had it for a very brief time. So to me, it kind of sounds a little of its time. What I didn't like and ended up really liking, the last track, Life is Just a Game. It starts out, I'm like, what does he do? He's like doing a Commodore song, right? But then all of a sudden, the vocal ends and they're cooking. And I think Billy Cobham plays on that, and that's unbelievable. And again, we're talking personal preference. None of these are bad. I think track 5 too, of Hot Fun, almost sounds like a TV show thing. It's got kind of that like 70s TV show. Great stuff. I mean, Stanley Clarke's a great player. There's some great musicians on here. But just for me, I'm thinking from my perspective and what I'm listening to, it falls to my number 4.
Yeah, I mean, that's what this is all about, right? So I'm with Lewis 100% here, because two of these albums I've been listening to since the 80s, and the other two have been wowing me very recently, right? So it's like, I have a lot of history with two, not much history with others, but I will reiterate what everybody said. These are all really great albums. It almost pains me to put any of them at number 4, right? But we're talking about not much separates these. So I'm going to go with Reaching Inside from Fernando Molinari. It's terrific, absolutely terrific. It's short and sweet. It's like, 35 minutes long. Great melodies throughout. I mean, the guy's a really good songwriter. That's like evident from the first time you listen to this. His bass playing is just absolutely impeccable. I love Focus, the kickoff track. Absolutely silky smooth guitar playing. Love the melodies. Mercurio just kicks ass. I mean, it's just part of it's almost like prog metal-y in spots, but it's just really, really intense. Great ensemble playing by the whole crew. Love the pop and bass lines throughout this album. It's just really good. Ocean Wind is another great song. Control is awesome. I mean, you can't fault it, right? It's just a nice mix of tempos throughout the whole CD. And it's got a lot of variety, killer album by a really, really talented guy. So it's my number 4, but I love it, right? It's nothing to sneeze at number 4. It's just that it's the way it works, right? Back to Lewis.
Okay. So my number 3, which may surprise some people, but my number 3 is going to be Stanley Clarke, School Days. I mean, look, the title track is just an earworm, and it's so well done, right? But when you hear it once, you know it for the rest of your life. It's as simple as that. And the closer is great. For me, though, I love what he does with the bass guitar. He's got so many great, he's got, George Duke plays in the closer, and it's just great. But there is something about the idea that I have to be playing a funk record somehow, right? I mean, you're not George Clinton, you're the Return to Forever guy. It's so there. I don't know. It took me a while when I first heard it. I remember I found it a difficult thing to digest. I didn't really understand why he would be playing in that style, and even though it's a Stone Cold classic for many good reasons, I'm gonna put this one at number 3. I just find that it is of the 4. This is the one that to me sounds more dated, right? And again, like I said before, the only reason this guy goes under is because this is statistically dense material. There's a lot of information on this record, and I apologize, I have not had enough time to digest it completely. It's a beautiful piece of work, but yeah, I'm gonna go with number 3, Stanley Clarke.
All right, George.
Number 3 is the Molinari. Great record. It was in my top 10 for last year. We did the top 10 show. Yeah, not a bad song on it. Good mix of aggression and melody. There's really nothing to pick apart here. Controls, one of my favorite songs, and Mercurio, another one. Desert Flower, that song's incredible. He's a real consistent writer. I got all 3 records, and they're all of this quality. I mean, he's a guy whose future looks really bright. He just moved to the US now, so hopefully that's going to get him playing with other players here. That should be interesting, but by a small margin, that's my number 3.
Cool. Eric?
My number 3, I'm going old school again. I'm going with Jaco. And I kind of called it the odd even record, because as I was listening to it, I'm like, all right, we kind of have a bass solo song, then we have a composed song, then we have another bass solo. And that kind of seemed how the flow of the record went. And I like his compositions. I think like Come On, Come Over, very funky. And I don't normally like the vocal songs, but it's a great song. And that's like, I think, School Days for Stanley Clarke. that's the song that sticks in my head as the vocal piece. And obviously his bass playing is incredible. But I think George pointed out too, the best part of this is when it's him and Herbie. When Hancock is playing on some of those tunes, the piano is lights out. I love his playing on this. But it just seems to me like, and it's not overplaying, but it's Jaco is always kind of on top of the mix, which I know it's a bass players and probably most of these are that way, but it just got to be a little much. And with kind of the back and forth between what sounded to me like solo pieces versus composed pieces was just a little over the top on the bass for me. I would have liked to have heard more, and I know like Word of Mouth and things like that, I think are more band albums. I just would like a few more band songs than maybe just Jaco and, you know, something else going on along with it. So that's my number 3 is Jaco Pastorius.
Cool. I'm going to go with Alex Lofoco's Beyond as my number 3. And like Lewis, I've been plagued with the wonderful U.S. Postal Service, so I have been forced to listen to this online over the last couple of weeks, and my hard copy CD still has not arrived. But yeah, I like it a lot. It's got a great cast, which we've talked about already. Miniman, Rudis, Marienthal, Miola, all great. The title track is kind of light and airy, but has this like fiery soloing. The guitar work is just drop dead terrific on this album. Really, really tasty. I love Earthquake, which is big and bombastic and some insane bass lines. Rolling the Stone might be my favorite out of all of them. It's kind of like this weird mix of like big band jazz, fusion, and prog metal. Just absolutely terrific. Mystery of Faith is good and funky. I don't know. It's a really wild album. Like Lewis mentioned, a lot going on here, a lot to take in, but it's produced impeccably. And I'm liking the intensity of this album quite a bit. It's actually, there's a lot to take in, but it packs a punch throughout. But it's really tasty and melodic at the same time. But that's my number 3. Back to Lewis.
So my number 2, like we said at the top of the show, this thing became the blueprint for the format of a lot of solo bass records in a way, right? I mean, and I think that Eric makes a very good point. While Jaco was able to compose and do some really interesting things in a variety of styles convincingly, I feel that this particular record was more concentrated on proving to the world that he was the best, and not so much in just making the best record that he could. And these two things are not the same thing. So as a bass player, this is school, right? And it's aspirational in many ways because a lot of his tone was in his hands, you know? It's just as simple as that. But it is not, you know, it does suffer from that schizophrenia of look at all I can do, right? Even though one of the things that he can do and proves that he can also compose, right? And compose very well. So this is going to be my number 2.
That being said, do you think he's better working within the confines of a weather report?
I think so, because with Weather Report, he had to compete with other people for the spotlight. And that meant that he couldn't overplay everything. For example, I don't know how you guys feel about this. As much as I love Donna Lee, and I think the percussionist was named, I got the olds, but
Donna Leas.
Yeah, the percussionist, yeah, the guy that plays the bongos all over the record.
Yeah,
he's kind of like the
Donna
secret
Leas.
weapon. Yeah,
Right.
that guy. But would it not be a little bit better sonically without that beat?
I agree. Yeah.
You know, I think that he just had to show you he could play this crazy thing as a counterpoint to this other rhythm, right? It's a little bit of a circus act that it's there, you know. I think I heard once Victor Wooten play Donna Lee just himself. And Victor Wooten, as we all know, is no slouch. And it just takes on such beauty, you know. So, you know, tightrope walking version, versus the tune itself. You know, I think this is why. I mean, I have to give it a number 2 because it's fucking Jaco, right? I mean, I just have to. But out of the 4, I can't honestly say it was my favorite.
All right, George.
Number 2 is Stanley Clarke. Actually, this is one of the earliest fusion albums that I ever got into. The guys who started me with Return to Forever and built out from there. So the first solo album stuff they gave me was Clarke and Demiola, you know?
Yep, same here.
So this is one of my first, and still to this day, I think the title track and Life is Just a Game are 2 of my favorite 70s fusion songs for the whole decade. I mean, I love those songs. I like all the rest of them except for the desert song, like Eric said, it's a little drifty. When you see McLaughlin on it, you kind of hope for a little bit more. But the rest of it, Quiet Afternoon, very pretty song. Hot Fun, like Eric said, kind of like a 70s cop show, funky tune with Steve Gadd on drums. You can't beat that. Basically, overall, it's hard to find any faults in this thing. I know some people like the self-titled better, but for me, this was always the Clarke album to have. So it's my number 2.
All right, Eric.
Okay, so I think as we've all talked about, we kind of found Stanley's to be the funkiest, and maybe Jaco is the most traditional. I'm going with my number 2 is Fernando Molinari, and I find his the most maybe rock oriented in terms of a lot of the playing on here. When I'm listening to the guitar players, their phrasing is more rock phrasing than fusion phrasing to me, at least from I'll say my limited knowledge up to this point. Now, and obviously it's my number 2. I love this record. George turned me on to this. I've had this, I think, probably since January. And a couple of the tracks I really like are Ocean Wind, which has like, maybe it's the clavinet sound of the keyboard. It's almost like a Gentle Giant feel to that one. The closer Control is incredible. And opening with that Focus and Mercurio, that's, I mean, right out of the gate, it just kills you. But and definitely fusion, you know, I'm not trying to send anyone the other way, but I find maybe this one is the most, and it rocks. And it's got that jazz stuff, and he's a great bass player, but I find it maybe is the most rock oriented of the 4 we've listened to, at least to my ears. So that's my number 2 is the Fernando Molinari.
Cool. All right, my number 2, I thought long and hard about my 1 and 2, because again, I've got such history with both of them. And it came down to, well, which one do I listen to more, right? And my number 2 is going to be Jaco. It's funny because we've talked about how like there's, you know, you have the more composed pieces where it's got a band feel, and then the kind of the solo pieces or the duo pieces and all that sort of stuff. It's like, I think that this at times in all the years I've been listening to it, it's like, all right, there's a lot of bass, a lot of look at me, this is what I can do, like Lewis mentioned. But it's funny because then on the follow-up, Word of Mouth, which is much more bombastic and big band and all that kind of stuff, I like that a lot because obviously it shows his great compositional sense. But there are times on that album where I'm like, I wanted to hear more bass, right? So it's like, I think with Jaco, we want it all, but we want it the way we want it, right? So, but I love this album. I mean, I think it's great. Donnelly is terrific. His technique is all over the place on this album. And this is a pretty groundbreaking record here. Come On, Come Over. Terrific groove. Yeah, I don't know. Me, I can usually do without vocals on fusion albums. I don't know, that's just me. I don't need vocals in jazz, but they're not bad at all. Continuum is absolutely lovely. Kuru Speaks Like a Child is nice and frantic, more of like a straight jazz piece. Forgotten Love, I mean, used to be a cha-cha is absolutely terrific. Could be my favorite song on here. Okonkoli, Trumpa, whatever. He's paired up with the French horn, which I think is kind of cool. I don't know. I like this a lot. I think it's great. For me personally, my favorite Jaco stuff still is when he plays in like bands or on other people's albums. I almost get it's like the Alan Holdsworth thing. Some of my favorite Jaco stuff is when he's appearing with other people. I love this album and I love Word of Mouth, but I find I don't listen to these two albums as much as I do Weather Report albums, or quite frankly, I wish he played more with Dimiola because he's amazing on that first Dimiola record. I've got a lot of these kind of live albums where he plays with Mike Stern and, various Borelli Legren and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, it's almost interesting to hear him when he's in more of like a band where he doesn't have to be the number one guy, but I love that stuff too. So, but yeah, it's a groundbreaking album. It's my number 2.
What about Bright Size Morning? Is that what it's called? The Pat Metheny thing?
Bright Size Life.
Bright Size Life.
Yeah, Bright Size Life. Bright Size Life.
That is probably my favorite recording ever with Jaco on. I'm glad you brought
Yeah,
that.
right. Exactly.
He's amazing on that album. And I think to me, Jaco and Pat Metheny are like the perfect marriage. And it's a shame they only worked together one other time on that self-titled Jaco album, which is also really good, a little more avant-garde. But yeah, Bright Size Life is just, to me, absolutely stunning. Yeah. All right, Lewis, you're number 1. I think we know what it's going to be.
Yes, I have to admit that for the heart wants what the heart wants, and I am a metalhead. And this guy, Fernando Molinari, for me was an absolute revelation. First of all, I give mad props to anyone that can play a fretless bass and hang in a tune as heavy as Mercurio or Focus. I mean, come on, right? Secondly, it's a lot of people try, but it's very difficult to get that jazz prog metal fusion to work. Especially because he doesn't do the obvious thing, which is make the guitar play all these fucked up chords, and then he just solos over it. Like Eric said, the guitarists play mainly crunch and blistering solos, right? So it's the composition that gives you all the flavors of the chords, and it's very smart, this record. I've lived with this for a while. It never overstays its welcome. It's just the right amount of time for music of this caliber for me. I absolutely fell in love with it, and the more I hear it, the more I like it. Also, I just love this record. I am a fan for life. I'm gonna be following this guy's career for as long as he puts out stuff. And the fact that he has Miniman as well helps propel, right? Because Miniman is not an idiot. He's a drummer, yes, but he's also a musician. He knows what the music needs, and he's able to conjure up some crazy stuff to make it happen. So I love it. This is my number 1, with the understanding that all these are great, right? But
yeah, cool. All right, George.
No surprise, my number 1, Lofoco, Beyond. I've had it long. Obviously, I had it longer than everybody else here. I've had a burn of it since it first came out. The first 3 years it was out, there was no CD available. It was just digital. So he finally pressed up CDs, and when I let Eric know about it, we jumped on it. I got the guy that recommended this to me recommended it because Marco was on it. That's why he looked into it. He's a progger. He doesn't really like fusion, but he heard it and he was like, "This is up your alley," and he turned me on to it. From the first moment I heard it, I was blown away. Like, for the reason, like Lewis said, it's got that metal meets fusion thing that's for guys that grew up with metal like we all did. It's like, you can't resist it. Initially, I thought maybe it might benefit from some more dynamics, because it's kind of full on until you get to the last track, the title track. It's kind of a airy bluesy thing, but the rest of it's kind of full on. But the more I sit with it through the years, I think I kind of appreciate that it's full on, because I assume the later records he will show other facets, But yeah, it's just great. He's a finger style player. He's a slapper extraordinaire. There's pretty much nothing he can't do. And this guy, Robbie Miola, guitar player, I don't know where he's from. He sounds like Al Di Meola to me. He's got that style. He's got Jesus Molina on keyboards on one tune. That's like one of the it guys right now. I wish he was on more of it, actually. And maybe I'll work more with him in the future. But if you're the type that wants like just to be blown away almost from minute 1, this is the one.
Awesome.
I gotta be honest. I suspect that if we were to be doing this a month later, I would have ranked this one higher. Because once I learn it,
It is dense.
I know I'm gonna fucking love it, right? But it's right now it's just punching me in the face a lot, and I'm not there yet, right? I welcome the punches, but I just can't. My brain is not quite absorbed it. But everything that George said, I agree with. It is also the fact that he uses the saxophones with those crunchy guitars the way he does, and the unison runs that he does, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful record. Like I said at the top, I do want to make that very clear. You absolutely need to buy this. Seriously, just buy it.
Once Lewis recovers from the concussion, he'll be.
I'm not that badly concussed. Buy it.
Cool. All right, Eric.
All right, I'm with George, and I'll say the same thing. When I bought this, it is very dense. I didn't get past the first two tracks. Rolling the Stone and Resurrection, I played over and over and over before I went on and listened to the rest. They absolutely blew me away. I think what I really like about this, obviously, again, coming from the guitar side, Robbie Miola is absolutely fantastic. I love his phrasing. And this, I think, was where the separation came from this album and the Molinari album. He's definitely a fusion player, or he's at least got that feel on this, which I really liked. But I also liked the horns really add something to this. They're heavy. They're done very well. And like George says, it's kind of a full-on onslaught until you hit the title track, which is the last song. But I just, like I said, I would listen to this and I'd be like, all right, I got to go back and play that again. And then finally, like, all right, I'll listen to the whole thing. It is a lot. It is very dense, but it is full on. Like, I guess, like you said, if you want to cross it as metal and fusion, I mean, they are heavy, but they're intricate. There's so many unison lines going on between Lofoco and Miola, the guitar player. The horns add another dimension to it. And I haven't even mentioned Miniman, who I think is great on both records. Absolutely fantastic. And that is my number one.
Cool.
Didn't even mention Jordan Rudess.
No, I didn't have to.
This is how good this record is, people. Seriously, you just have to fucking buy it.
Yeah,
that's all I can say.
Yeah, he fits right in, but he's not doing his normal Jordan Rudess stuff like he would.
No, it's very nice. Yeah, very nice.
All right, no surprise. My number one by process of elimination is School Days. Now, I think George mentioned that this was one of the first of the fusion albums he got into way back in the day. It was the same thing with me. In fact, I would say this is probably, if it wasn't the third, it was the fourth or fifth fusion album I ever got. So we're going way back when I first started listening to this type of music. And, I was already into Stanley from the Return to Forever stuff. So I fell in love with this. And, there's a couple cats who play on this that we really haven't touched on today. Ray Gomez is one of my favorite fusion guitar players that just like nobody ever talks about. I mean, he shows up on a couple of these Stanley Clarke albums and just rips. I mean, that's him on the title track here. He plays on a couple songs on here. It's just, the guy just kills it. And come on, David Sancious, his mini mode playing on this album is just amazing. I love the groove to this whole album. It's funky, it's jazzy. There's even a little disco on this album, folks, just a little bit. I love the dancer. The dancer to me is like this weird mix of funk and fusion and like these weird airy disco things going on. But man, it's got one of the best grooves on any album. I absolutely love it. I don't mind Desert Song too much. It does meander a little bit. It's fairly longish, but man, anytime you got John McLaughlin on a track, can't be all that bad. And I love Life Is Just a Game, even though I still wish they would have ditched the vocals. But man, how about Icarus Johnson coming in at the end and just tossing in this like rampaging solo, which might be the best one on the whole album. You know, you think Icarus Johnson, most people are like, who the fuck is Icarus Johnson, right? But we've talked about him a few times on this channel in the past where he pops up here and there. And man, he's just another killer player. So I love this album. I think it's great. You know, whether this is better or worse than the self-titled, I like both of them almost equally, but this is Stanley Clarke's most fun album. And again, it's my number one because it's the one I really have listened to the most in my life. And I still get a kick. I've listened to this again recently to get ready for the show. And I was like, oh yeah, I just totally love it. Whereas the Jaco, the reason it beats the Jaco album for me is because I think, you know, Jaco, it's all about the technique and look what I can do. And it's groundbreaking. But this album to me is the more fun album to listen to. The Jaco I listen to when I want to be really impressed and really like study it and listen to it and be like, okay, yeah, check this out. This album, you just groove along to and you just get into the whole, you know, everything that's going on here. So yeah, School Days, my number one, the most history with me out of all of them.
They're actually named incorrectly, right? I mean, in a way, this is School Days.
Yeah.
This is Party, right? I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, yeah.
Such a fun album. All right. So George's pick of the week. What do you got, George? What?
Well, for the people that saw the first one, the pick I assigned was Tetsuo Sakurai, Gentle Hearts, 2001 release. It's basically a trio record with Dennis Chambers and Greg Howe. Akira Onizuka does play some keys, mostly backgrounds. He doesn't solo on the record. And they really kind of background him. But it's basically a power trio. And I'm curious to see what you guys thought. Eric?
Well, I just got a little disappointment in that Greg Howe is canceling his tour. I was supposed to see him in August. Unfortunately, I think his partner is sick, so he's choosing not to tour. You know, we've talked about Protocol 4. I love Greg Howe. I absolutely love his playing. I know you're a huge Dennis Chambers guy. This one, it's a knockout. I mean, you could feel his bass in your chest on that opening track. I mean, it's just so, he's real, whether he's slapping, I'm not sure what the technique is he's using there, but that bass really, it just pounds you. You caught me off guard with the Softy title track, which I like. I mean, it's very melodic, and I think it serves a purpose because it shows his play, another side of his playing. I think the last track as well is a bit more mellow. But you've got 6 tracks that really kind of smack you, and then you've got those 2 that kind of lay back, good kind of break in the middle of the record, and then a nice way out of the record. But he's a fantastic player, and having Howe and Chambers with him, top notch all the way around. So I'm thrilled that you recommended this, because obviously, like Lewis said, I think this is something that is not too common. I don't know that I would have ever come across it otherwise, but it's fantastic. It's really a great record.
I would agree. I was pretty blown away by this album. I was like, holy cow. First of all, I mean, you know, we all know how amazing Greg Howe is. We all know how otherworldly Dennis Chambers is, right? And you throw this guy in here who is just an impeccable player. I mean, so melodic. So, I mean, the intensity is just all there. And these 3 guys, I mean, holy cow. Samurai Faith, just absolutely blistering. Brainstorm kills. I love the title track. Old school sounding punk jazz is just amazing. How about Dennis just going ballistic on The Invisible Way? I mean, Jesus. And then you got Maximum, which is just an absolute shred fest, but it's still very melodic. To me, this was like kind of like, you know, not trying to dip too much into the Far East type of comparison, but to me, this was like Kenso meets Kazumi Watanabe on absolute steroids, right? In other words, you know, completely built up, you know, and just amazing stuff. I was really blown away by this. Great stuff.
I was going to make a Kenso analogy also. I think you nailed it. And to me, one of the things that I also have to say about Sakurai, which is not common in these sort of recordings, is that a lot of the times the bass players want to go for a very scoop sound that is very suitable for slap, and it's very compressed in a particular way so that you get the somewhat like a limiter kind of a sound. And this guy slaps like he's like he's spanking his girlfriend, but on top of that, he is actually also handling a really nice, almost tube grit kind of tone, which adds to that. I mean, you described it perfectly, Eric. At the beginning, that thing you feel, that's balls. That's a tone that is not, what's that word in English? Antiseptic, kind of very polished. Like he has a, and everything is always under control, right? It never gets away from him. He has just the right amount of snarl. And then Dennis does what Dennis does. And of course, Greg Howe does Greg Howe. So then my only disappointment really is that they didn't just commit to the, let's just take some people's heads off approach. Like, I understand that they felt like maybe they needed to give people a breather, but for me, I'm okay with go heavy or go home. Because these guys can do it, right? And they can do it convincingly with melody, with class. I loved it. I love that record also. That I'm on, my only disappointment with it is I can't find a copy that I can afford without, But other than that, this is a great album. So as usual, when George talks and I watch him, I take notes because he's never let me wrong. So this is what I do, right? So thank you, George, because this is a fucking killer record.
Yep, I agree.
Indeed. Well, the George's pick for next month actually is this one. Self-titled debut from a band called Lost Tribe, a New York band. It's a 1993 release. Eric already got it, and it's on its way to Pete. So we will find out in June what you boys thought.
All right.
And those out there that have a chance to listen to it, go check it out.
Yeah. See, we're interactive on this show. See that?
Yeah.
And everybody gets assignments. Very cool. So so for those watching, you have a little work to do here. So rank the 4 albums we discussed today. So you've got the Stanley Clarke, the Jaco Pastorius, and you've got the Fernando Molinari and the Alex Lofoco. If you can find them out there, get them. If you listen to them online, you rank the albums as you like them down in the comments below. And let us know what you think about the Tetsu Sakurai album, which is a barn burner, Gentle Hearts, really, really good stuff. And don't forget also to be on the lookout for some of George's new releases that he mentioned at the beginning of the beginning of the show. It's been a long night, guys. I've been on Zoom half the day, it seems like. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. And tune in next month to another 4Fusion Friday. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, and we're here all together on YouTube all the damn time. For Eric Porter, George Lamie, and Louis Nasser, I am Pete Pardo. Have a good weekend, everybody. Stay tuned for Friday morning at the Funhouse with Martin Popoff and myself. And we've got tomorrow, the UK Connection. Sunday is album homework assignment. And of course, we have Monday starts the week off once again with the Hudson Valley Squares. So thanks for watching, everybody. See you real soon. Bye-bye.